Have you ever wondered how people managed to wake up on time before the invention of alarm clocks? It may come as a surprise, but there were actually professional knocker-uppers who would physically hit your window with a stick until you got out of bed. But before that, humans had an entirely different understanding of time. The first question is how people even kept track of time at all. That's one of humanity's oldest problems. First and foremost, it was through natural observation. People would observe the movement of the sun by day and the moon and stars by night. Astronomy is the oldest science, so it would make sense that the first devices for measuring time were sundials. They were invented thousands of years ago. After sundials came more complex creations, such as water clocks, hourglasses, and even something as simple as a candle marked with hour lines. So how did people set alarms? In both ancient Greece and China, complicated and carefully calibrated water clocks were used. Plato apparently had one which forced air through a whistle when it ran down, thus waking him up for his dawn lectures. Then there were church bells and the call to prayer, both of which sounded at regular times throughout the day and night to mark the hours of worship and gathering. Whether for an entire town or a monastery, this was one of the oldest communal forms of alarm clock. Other methods were more rudimentary, such as drinking a load of water right before bed. And then there's the sun, of course. People slept in rooms facing east so it would wake them up when it rose. Dawn also had its natural alarms, birds singing, cows lowing, cockerels crowing. With the invention of mechanical clocks in the 14th century, a new method of timekeeping was invented. They weren't particularly accurate and were restricted to large civic or religious clock towers, but it gave towns and cities a revolutionary new technology. Soon they were scaled down and improved. Domestic clocks, even watches, had been invented by the 16th century. This encouraged a slew of inventive mechanical alarms, such as an 18th century clock that had a flintlock mechanism which lights a candle at a set time, essentially a predecessor of the modern mechanical alarm clock, first patented in the 19th century to be replaced in the 20th century by radio and digital. But what's more interesting and important isn't so much how people woke up, but why they needed to wake up at all. For most of history, the vast majority of people worked in what we now call agriculture. Peasants and laborers couldn't afford watches or domestic clocks, of course, but nor did they really need to, because their job wasn't about how many hours they had to work, but about what tasks needed to be done in any given day, week, month, or season. Merchants, scholars, princes, monks, politicians, and bureaucrats, they needed more accurate methods of alarms and timekeeping, but they represented a vanishingly small percentage of the population. The majority of people worked according to natural rather than man-made schedules. The need for knocker-uppers arose during the Industrial Revolution because people were no longer working in nature but in factories. It was the hours set by the manager, not the sun, which dictated when people worked and what they did. Our relationship with time changed. Whereas the length of hours were once variable and people divided up time based on how long it took to plow a field or roast corn, we now have seconds defined as 9,192,631,770 cycles of radiation of the cesium-133 atom. Have you ever wondered how we came up with measurements like inches, feet, and miles? Once upon a time, they were based on parts of the human body or common objects like crops. For instance, a li used to represent the distance an army could march in an hour. Plus, every country had its own definition of an inch, usually based on the width of a thumb. But now, we have more standardized systems. Meters are defined as the length of the path traveled by light in a vacuum over a specific time interval. This level of precision became necessary in an increasingly globalized and industrial world. Speaking of industrialization, did you know that before railways, every town kept its own time? The introduction of time zones helped prevent transport chaos. Back in the day, the precision of minutes and seconds wasn't as necessary. Life was more attuned to nature and the seasons. People worked according to the sun and stars, and there were no Zoom meetings or deadlines. Peasants measured time by the bells and songs of the day, and their lives were ordered by the time it took to complete certain tasks, like cooking an egg. they had more holidays than we do today. This shift from a less precise world to a more industrialized one inspired the Romanticism movement. Society became more defined by science and industry, turning people into machines. Nowadays, we may not have knocker-uppers to wake us up for work, but our phones serve the same purpose. The ubiquity of alarm clocks is emblematic of the evolution of a pre-industrial to an industrial world. As we became more globalized and technologically advanced, it's interesting to see how our measurement systems and relationship with time has evolved.